You're watching Obama in Springfield. The President Returns, a News Channel 20 special report.
Welcome back to News Channel 20. Stacy Skryzak, Adam Rife here at the desk for this hour of News Channel 20 special presentation of President Obama's return to the capital city. So many things going on in so many different areas. People just abuzz. People got a chance to see him, even talk with him, meet him. We'll hear from them a little bit later in the afternoon.
And you saw that as we were showing video of the Hoagland Center where President Obama was speaking to a private group of people. You had to have tickets to that event, but you saw the smiles coming out of the Hoagland Center from visitors to that event. Senator Dick Durbin helped introduce President Obama. He had told the audience, "I will tell you, I believe today, as I did 9 years ago, that his vision, his leadership, and his determination were exactly the right thing for America," giving praise to President Obama.
Good friends going back many, many years. They were both serving in the Senate. Of course, Senator Durbin's been there for 30-plus years. President Obama joined him as the two Illinois senators for many years before 2008 when he was elected to the presidency. Let's send things out to the Hoagland Center where we saw people exiting. Our reporter Lindsay Hess is outside with a very special guest. Lindsay?
Adam and Stacy, President Obama just wrapped up his speech here at the Hoagland Center for the Arts. The attendees have been filing out the front door, and joining me now is Alderman Doris Turner. Now, Alderman, you were one of the first people here in line. We caught up with you this morning. What was your experience like here today at the Hoagland?
It was absolutely wonderful. You know, what really struck me about it is that it was such an intimate event. You know, we were just like feet from the president, and he spoke so intimately to people in the room. You could tell that what he said about coming to Springfield to say thank you for all the support that everyone gave him was really true, because he was calling out people in the audience, and you could tell that these are people that he knows. These are his friends. These are people that have been his supporters for a very, very long time. So it was absolutely wonderful.
How long did he speak, and what was his message?
You know, he spoke for probably about 20-25 minutes, and he really talked about how we should ask more from our democracy and how we needed to be citizens first, and how he was really looking forward to taking on that role. He talked a little bit about his presidency and what that was like, and then he really spent most of the time thanking people, talking about his experiences in different parts of Illinois and what that meant to him, and how he was really looking forward to coming back here. And then he really took a lot of time to stop and shake hands and talk to people, and and engage in conversations and really get on a personal level with people who were in the audience.
It was standing room only, more than 200 people. What was the energy like?
Oh, it was absolutely wild. You know, what I thought was really interesting and really nice was while we were waiting for him to come, the music was so energetic and upbeat, and it was definitely President Obama music. It was a lot of Motown and a lot of Stevie Wonder, that kind of thing. And the crowd was just, all real lively and just, energetic. And when he walked in the room, it just went nuts. So it was definitely the experience of a lifetime. So while, most of the people in that room, I'm sure, have seen him before and have seen him speak before. We were all here, twice down on the old state capitol, but this time it was really different. It was more like talking to an old friend.
You were also able to see his speech from the Capitol here at the Hoagland, right? Yes. And as the Democratic chairwoman for Sangamon County, the president talked about building a better politics. Do you think that struck a chord with lawmakers?
I really think it did. And I think that the way that he expressed it, I think was very good, because he wasn't preachy. It was more like colleagues talking to colleagues. And when he would say things that he knew were correct things to say that people should really take note of, if the Republicans didn't clap or didn't acknowledge it, he would kind of call them out on it, and in a jousting kind of way. So I thought that was kind of cool. But he really did talk about how we really need to be more conciliatory and learn how to work more cooperatively with each other for the greater good. And I think that that's really pertinent right now with everything that's going on in the state of Illinois. He made a passing comment about, legislators are supposed to do things like pass a budget. And there was just, those kind of innuendos that were dropped, in the message the whole time. I thought it was really, the crowd really went nuts when he kind of did I called it a Southside Chicago shout out to Representative Ken Duncan. So I thought that was kind of cool.
It's definitely been an exciting day, a very historic day, and we're expecting President Obama to be leaving the Hoagland at any moment, and we'll keep you updated with all the information as it becomes available. Back to you.
All right, Lindsay, thanks so much. Great to hear the excitement in their voices. Great to hear that everybody just had a good time. And also there was the message behind it. This wasn't a pep rally necessarily. It was a call to action. I like that.
Definitely. And someone that was at the speech at the State House, this is State Senator Dave Syverson. He's representing the Rockford, Illinois area. We, I believe, have him on the phone.
Senator, can you hear us?
I sure can. Thank you.
Appreciate you taking time here on a busy day, an exciting day. You were actually called out specifically by the president as an ally, someone who worked across the aisle to get things done. Did you expect to be named in the president's speech, and what was your reaction sitting there and hearing it?
Well, I wasn't, but we had talked earlier. We had a little reception for those who had served with him when he was here, so we had a chance to talk, and we did get some good things done. But I think in that case, what the difference was, one, it was a different day, I think, when people did work better across both sides of the aisle. But at that point, the legislature was split. So one party controlled the Senate, one controlled the House. So you really were forced to reach compromise. And so it was a little bit easier to do that, because if you really wanted to get something passed, you had to sit down and work together. And he and I worked together on Illinois' welfare reform legislation, Illinois' kid care health plan. So we got some good things done. But I think that was in part, again, because we were split control of the legislature.
For Republicans in the minority, Senator, of course, the dream perhaps is to even things out, as you said, if not to control both chambers, at least one to balance the power somewhat. But here in Illinois, we're getting progressively blue. We'll see what the next election holds, but it may be difficult to balance that power. Is it possible to hear the president's words today and make progress towards bipartisanship, towards compromise, while not changing the balance of power in the General Assembly?
Well, I think the one thing the president said that I totally agree on is the changing of how redistricting is done. He is totally right that when the politicians are drawing the lines, the boundary lines for elected officials, then you do whatever it takes to keep your party happy so you can have control over your district. We need to take redistricting away from the elected officials and let the public decide who represents you, not the politicians. If we could get redistricting reform done in Illinois, it would be the most dramatic change in Illinois' history when it comes to working in a bipartisan way and getting the people to have more input into their elected officials. And we're going to try. There's going to be a move to do a citizens initiative on redistricting. But again, the Speaker has held that up in the past, being able to pass that. But that would certainly have a big bearing on changing the climate in Illinois.
And we have done quite a bit of coverage on that independent map amendment movement, so we'll keep an eye on that as well.
And
I appreciate that.
I see on Twitter you tweeted out a picture of yourself with President Obama and mentioning that you worked together for 7 years. You disagreed on issues, but you also worked together on those issues that you agreed on. It seemed like the common theme of unity today. What was that reaction amongst your other colleagues today after the speech was over?
Well, surprisingly, that it doesn't always get reported, but that still happens a lot today. Last week when we were down here, same thing. That we work together when we disagree on issues. We still work together in a civil way. But when the work is over, we still go out and we socialize. We go out to dinner, or we may go play cards. And for most legislators down here, they can separate the politics from the personalities, and that doesn't always get reported, but we could do that, and we still do that. And we could reach a budget agreement today in the Senate. It's just really the House where it's been a problem. And what's sad is the solution for Illinois is so simple. We know we have to change our jobs climate, and we know because of the amount of debt we have to raise the temporary tax and put that back on. So let's just do those two things, change the jobs climate, put the tax back on, and let's get Illinois moving forward. And most people agree with that, but at this point we've had problems with the House Democrats not wanting to enact any jobs reforms, and so we've been at a standstill. But once we get to a point where we get people to understand those are the two simple changes we do, and if we do that, Illinois moves forward, I think we'll get there.
Last question for you, Senator, before you go. We do appreciate your time here on a very busy and exciting day. Do you expect the caucuses, the chambers, the parties to have meetings following the president's address over the next several days, maybe next week, to talk about moving forward? Or is tomorrow, later today, is it business as usual in the state capitol?
Well, unfortunately, there's still some partisanship, and it didn't start well when the president today, when he chose to come here, saying to the Republican congressmen who represent this area, you can't fly with me. If you want to come, you get your own transportation. And that wasn't a very good way to start off this in a bipartisan event. And to tell the governor, you get one seat and you have to sit with everybody else. That's not, a way you try to start to do something is showing bipartisanship. So it unfortunately it didn't begin the way it really should have been, and those who were in charge of this, I think, should have been acting in a more conciliatory way, and I think that would have fared it better. But like I said, the legislature works well together. At this point, it's really trying to get a couple of the leaders that are struggling is to put enough pressure on them to come back to the table. But the rest of the legislature, I think we work well together already.
Senator, we appreciate your time and your candor. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
That's Senator Dave Syverson from Rockford, the Rockford area. He was called out, lauded by President Obama for their work together in the state Senate back when President Obama served in that chamber, for working together, compromising. And one of the lines President Obama said is, we don't call each other idiots or fascists who don't like America, because then we'd have to admit we play poker, we hang out, we're friends with idiots and fascists. And as Senator Syverson just said, they do work together on many things. It's just those big ticket items right now that's holding up the state budget, and 222 days as we continue now without a budget.
Yeah, more than 7 months. I believe we've got some video here of Walnut and Jefferson, the motorcade, presidential motorcade, expected to be coming through soon, leaving from the Hoagland Center downtown as they head down Walnut back to the airport. And President Obama will be boarding Air Force One once again and heading off to California.
That's right. The president heading to San Jose, California this evening for the next stop of his trip right now. Again, we're looking at Walnut and Jefferson preparing for the presidential motorcade. I'm not sure yet if it has left the Hoagland Center, but we are monitoring both locations right now. If you remember from earlier in our coverage, at about 11 o'clock this morning, maybe 11:30 after the president landed, as we look left at some traffic stalled and waiting. Of course, this is not like a parade, perhaps, where you just let a few cars through if there's time. They are locking down this route. But if you remember from earlier in our coverage at 11:30 when the president traveled to downtown Springfield to the feed store for lunch, it was an extensive motorcade, Stacy, about, I'd say, two dozen cars at least, because the president travels with so much support staff. There are press that are on Air Force One that travel with him. There are medical teams on alert. So it'll be we won't miss it, is what I'm trying to say here. We're going to see that presidential limo and several other vehicles once they make their way north to the airport. Again, Jefferson and Walnut is what we're looking at right now. Obviously no movement yet, but we are keeping an eye on that. Springfield police on the left side. And as we watch that parade route, as we watch the motorcade route, we're going to have more coverage here as the president prepares to leave Springfield. Again, President Obama preparing to head back to the airport and get on Air Force One. We'll have that live when he makes his departure in a moment on News Channel 20. Stay with us.
You're watching Obama in Springfield. The president returns. A News Channel 20 special report.
4:04, welcome back to News Channel 20, our special coverage of President Obama's return to Springfield, preparing for the departure as President Obama's motorcade set to make its way to Abraham Lincoln Capitol Airport. We have reporters covering that route as well as at the airport, ready to carry that live. It'll be historic seeing him leave once again. His second trip to Springfield as a president, first time addressing the General Assembly. It
looks a little different from 9 years ago today when he first announced
He looks a little different, doesn't he?
A little. I noticed a little more gray hair.
Yes, but that gray hair and all the selfies that we're tracking here from lawmakers who are just as giddy as people along the parade route. That he looks great. He looks happy to be back in Springfield, and he said as much in his address. We have reporters, as we said, all across the parade route. We begin our coverage this half hour with Brendan Cullerton, who's on Capitol and 5th Street, preparing to watch the presidential motorcade make its way west before heading north to the airport. Brendan?
Adam, I'm here at 5th and Capitol, where as we speak, police, I should say, are turning people away as they are told you cannot cross Capitol Street right now as we await that presidential motorcade. As we turn over here, I'll just have you follow me. There are a lot of police officers, all law enforcement backed up on the street over there. Again, as we await the motorcade, you cannot cross Capitol Street. A lot of congestion downtown, actually, because many of the streets are still closed off in sections, including Monroe and Walnut. Obviously, here at Capitol, where we are, you see all the police. That's making the traffic very congested, as there are only so many places where the cars can go. As you see, they are directing traffic, waving it through. And again, this will be going on. All the streets will remain closed until that motorcade gets all the way back to the airport, possibly until the president is in the air. So we will keep you updated on the traffic situation downtown, and we'll let you know as soon as that motorcade does end up going through. But for now, reporting live in Springfield, Brendan Cullerton, News Channel 20.
All right, thank you, Brendan. And he mentioned something that Brett mentioned earlier. Brett Baldock was there for when the president landed. Brett said that the roads locked up immediately when the president touched down. I wonder if we'll see the reverse, that as soon as he takes off, a relaxed atmosphere across the city of Springfield, as there's no longer a threat or a need to lock down those roads. So we'll keep an eye on that.
And Jordan said the same thing, that, you know, it was back to work at the state capitol, where everything was put on standstill. Everyone was escorted out, and only the legislators and a few other people were allowed in the state capitol as he was doing his speech. And then right after, it was back to normal.
We've had special team coverage all day long of President Obama's historic address to the Illinois General Assembly. We've been taking a look at some of the highlights from that speech in case you miss it and are joining us after work here on News Channel 20 or online, newschannel20.com. Let's listen to one of the bites here where President Obama talked about the difficulties of working together, saying it's not easy, it doesn't always work out, and change doesn't come quickly. Let's take a listen.
We fought hard for our positions. And I don't want to be nostalgic here. We voted against each other all the time. And party lines held most of the time. But those relationships, that trust we built, meant that we came at each debate assuming the best in one another and not the worst.
Okay, and he was acknowledging during this that it wasn't always rosy, that there were some problems, and talked a lot about the gridlock at a national level.
Right, yes, he's obviously transitioned from state politics to national politics and faced issues with the legislative bodies in both. Things aren't perfect in Washington, D.C., as we've heard over the past several months. In fact, the president letting go of issuing his final budget yesterday, $4.1 trillion. Immediate backlash from Republicans opposing that. So it's certainly not easy to get things done in Washington. But the president says, especially at the state level where he served, here he says you have to start by saying things aren't perfect. Let's take a listen.
One that understands the success of the American experiment rests on our willingness to engage all our citizens in this work. And that starts by acknowledging that we do have a problem, and we all know it. What's different today is the nature and the extent of the polarization, how ideologically divided the parties are. And it's brought about by some of the same long-term trends in our politics and our culture.
President Obama, he was mentioning that during his time on a state level, he was able to cross the party aisle and get along, as we heard from some of the other state senators, but it just didn't really translate to a national level, and he admitted that.
That's right. We heard just briefly moments ago from State Senator Dale Syverson, who said the same thing, that they do work together. Even now, President Obama is not going to come back and miracles aren't going to take place, but they do work together. They do even enjoy each other's company. It's just going after those big ticket items, and it starts at the top with the budget. President Obama, throughout his speech, talking about compromise. That was the theme we heard over and over in the hour-long address. Let's listen to him right now talk about the importance and what would happen if they can't in the State House.
But so often, these debates, particularly in Washington, but increasingly in state legislatures, become abstractions. It's as if there are no people involved. It's just cardboard cutouts and caricatures of positions. It encourages the kind of ideological fealty that rejects any compromise as a form of weakness. And in a big, complicated democracy like ours, if we can't compromise by definition, we can't govern ourselves.
If we can't compromise, we can't govern ourselves. By definition, President Obama earlier today addressing the Illinois General Assembly, there were a lot of laughs throughout the speech. He picked his spots, and he chose them well, I thought. There were a lot of digs at some lawmakers in good nature. But the president also acknowledged that he wasn't going to be there touting Republican or bipartisan ideals only. He also talked about what made him proud to be a Democrat, and that got some laughs along the way, too, as they reacted to that list.
Yeah, let's take a listen.
I believe that people should have access to health care. I believe they should have access to a good public education. I believe that workers deserve a higher minimum wage. I believe that collective bargaining is critical to the prospects of the middle class and that pensions are vital to retirement as long as they're funded responsibly. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Sit down, Democrats. Sit down. Sit down.
telling fellow Democrats, take a seat. We have larger points to talk about here. What we didn't see there in that shot in the pool feed was reaction from the crowd. Jordan Abudayyeh telling us that Democrats standing much like a State of the Union address. The aisle was split. You saw all Democrats applauding those Democratic ideals. But yeah, he was telling them, take a seat. Let's talk about bipartisanship here.
Yeah. So one other soundbite we want to get to.
Oh boy, was it funny! And this one's going to be played back quite a bit here, as State Rep Ken Duncan has made no bones about stepping out of party lines. Many accusing him of being a Republican. President Obama, not in name in the beginning, certainly acknowledged that. Look, doing what's a compromise, doing what's right, doesn't make you a sellout. And then we're told, Jordan tells us that Representative Duncan stands up. You'll see when. Take a look.
I think sometimes my Republican colleagues make constructive points about outdated regulations that may need to be changed, or programs that, even though well-intended, didn't always work the way they were supposed to. And where I've got an opportunity to find some common ground, that doesn't make me a sellout to my own party. That applies now. The same, well, we'll talk later, Duncan. You just sit down.
Even our pool feed got, a little.
It was a standing ovation when he said, sit down, Duncan, we'll talk later. Yeah, Representative Ken Duncan again stepping away from House Speaker Michael Madigan, saying he doesn't work for him, he doesn't work for the governor, he wants to vote independently. Not a lot of people believe him. We'll have to check in with Representative Duncan a little bit later and see if he was able to sleep on the floor. Remember, that's been his ploy lately. We're not leaving until we get a budget done. He came with his sleeping bag. I don't think Secret Service let him do it last night.
No, and he did get to President Obama laying out his plans, a few different plans and ideas to help the legislature here get together and come to a compromise. We're going to lay some of those out later.
All right, we'll be back after the break with more special coverage from News Channel 20. Stay with us.
You're watching Obama in Springfield. The President Returns, a News Channel 20 special report.
Welcome back. Shift change here as John Rieger puts on the different shoes, reporting all day long for President Obama's arrival at the state capitol. Incredible to see that entourage arrive. You saw that presidential limo. What was it like in person?
Well, big entourage. The entourage is a bit more impressive than the limo. And of course, you don't see the president get out of his car because whether it be for weather purposes or for security purposes, it was in a tent that we pointed out that he got into, and then he it was over the doorway so that he got out of the car and got in. But he did wave as he left. We did catch that. So it went from being the center of the universe for security purposes here in the capital city to, boy, a ghost town as soon as he
second he heads out to the Hoagland Center.
Second he heads out. So good coverage today of that, and we'll be following him as he departs. And of course, we caught him touching down too at the airport. So we've been following all day. We're going to continue to do that as we continue our interviews here.
All right. So John was at the State House seeing President Obama arrive, and of course, he delivered that speech that about an hour on the dot. We're joined now on the phone by Andy Shaw, president of the Better Government Association, a watchdog group that keeps an eye on state and national politics. And Andy, you've been a political reporter for so many years. What did you hear from President Obama today that maybe was a surprise, or was this much of what we expected from the president?
Well, I thought it was a very impressive address. It was rich in tone and content, and I think there were some subtleties and also some very overt messages. The subtle message, which I think may be most important at this time in Springfield, is the need to tone down the harsh partisan rhetoric. And that seems to be directed most appropriately to Governor Rauner, who has been scorched earth on the subject of Mike Madigan and the Democrats. And I think what the president was essentially saying is we need to work with these people. We may disagree with them ideologically. We can have fierce political battles. But when we lose our civility and we start calling names and really castigating, we lose the ability to work together. Now, the message to Mike Madigan and the Democrats, equally subtle, was that even if you're ideologically polarized and have vast differences in your philosophies, which the Democrats and the governor do, you can still find common ground. And as he pointed out, the Affordable Care Act, the federal recovery from the brink of depression, financial regulation, 7 budgets, the debt ceiling, all of those very, very contentious, but ultimately approved in a bipartisan fashion. Not the Affordable Care Act that was passed by Democrats before Republicans took Congress, but all of those other things required a level of bipartisan cooperation. I think that message to Mike Madigan is, you know, you want a budget, you want revenue increases, you're going to have to work with the governor on some of the turnaround agenda items. And I think that there was a very powerful message about the need to do that. He talked very effectively about his time in Springfield and a number of things that got done when he and others from the Republican side crossed the aisle and worked collaboratively. People who generally would disagree with him on most issues found common ground on some, and that's what we need in Springfield now to resolve the budget deadlock. We have to find common ground, even if we're ideologically separate.
Mr. Shaw, though, we heard Governor Rauner say before, about last week, before the president was coming, that why should we listen to the president? He hasn't been able to bring these people together, bring both parties together in Washington. Why is he giving us advice here in Illinois to rectify our house?
Well, that's a good point, and I think Obama's been very clear. He's been almost apologetic in his last few speeches. He acknowledges that one of his biggest regrets is the failure to end the gridlock and the polarization. He even said in one of his speeches, if he'd been a little more like FDR or Lincoln, maybe he'd have gotten more accomplished. So that's very true. He hasn't been able to do it, but what he has been able to do is govern for 7 years in a civil way. Yes, there's been polarization and gridlock, but you rarely see Barack Obama calling names or castigating or screaming at the other side. And I think that's all he's saying. He's not suggesting that there's a magic potion to get this thing together, but that you have a little better chance of reaching compromise if you tone down the rhetoric. And I think he cannot be accused of excessive rhetoric over the years. He has lacked bipartisan successes, but the rhetoric itself has been kept toned down there. He's done his bit for civility, if not for ending the polarization.
Andy, before we let you go here, towards the end of the president's address, he talked about those 3 bullet points for better politics, and it sounded like a campaign layout right there. Do we expect the president to to start traveling the country and really hitting these 3 bullet points he talked about, reducing the influence of money in politics, no more gerrymandering, and redraw some districts more fairly, and then making voting easier and more modern for people? Do we expect the president here, and he may not be lame duck yet as he still has 11 months in office, but he does have a lot of time to think about his legacy. Is this the direction he goes?
Well, I think he's going to go in this direction and many others that reflect his core values. You know, he cares deeply about pay equity and women's rights and minority rights and protecting workers and health care and child care, education. I think his post-presidency is going to be a lot like Bill Clinton's, less on the international scale, though, and more focused on creating better institutions and better programs in this country. On the political side, I can tell you, happily, from a good government standpoint, he sounded like the things I say at the Better Government Association. We do need to end the gerrymandering of our districts so voters can pick representatives instead of representatives picking voters. That's a very timely thing to come out for when there's a redistricting push going on right now in Illinois. The effort to control big money, that's a lot harder because of Supreme Court rulings. But if we have more real-time reporting of contributions, more transparency, and less dark money flowing, at least we'll know who's giving what to whom. That's a critical reform. And in terms of voting, we need to make same-day registration permanent. We need to look at the possibility of online voting. We need to think about ways to make ballot access easier so people can get on the ballot and stay on the ballot. We have to do all those things carefully so as not to encourage vote fraud. But those are things that the BGA has fought for and will continue to in Springfield. And I think those are elements of a healthy democracy that we need a lot of work on. Our democracy's broken in a lot of ways now, and I think his mission post-presidency is going to be to work on fixing the democracy and fixing those institutions. You're right; he's been far less than successful in Washington in that bipartisan cesspool. But when he leaves and he has the bully pulpit to himself, I think he will travel around, and I think he'll have a full agenda of things he thinks will make this a better country. We'll see how it goes.
All right, Andy Shaw from the Better Government Association. Andy, good to hear from you. We appreciate your time. Look forward to analysis today and tomorrow on bettergov.org. That's Andy Shaw from the Better Government Association.
And don't forget, we're following the president. He's at the Hoagland Center right now. We'll follow him as he leaves there and travels out to the airport and have him taking off. So we've got a lot more coverage ahead. Stay with us.